This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
I want to start with healthcare. You've heard me say this many times probably, but the Chamber's been involved with the healthcare file for longer than I've been around. We've had our Physician Recruitment and Retention Committee since '09. It's been on our policy priority list since that time, and in fact, the last 2 years, it's been the number one priority of our members that have come back in our annual member surveys. Members have told us that affects their business as much as anything else, and like I say, things are related, much like education and housing, which I also want to get into. But I'm gonna start by quoting you. In June, you stated that Fredericton's healthcare crisis persists with the province's lengthiest wait list, leaving 30,000 without primary care, and ER waits lengthening due to recruitment neglect. So, very open-ended, what actions are immediately needed to address, as you said, Fredericton's healthcare crisis, which I very much agree with?
Well, immediately for our family docs, they could accommodate more patients and see more patients more quickly if we would do two things. One, eliminate the obligation that they currently have to take shifts at the deck at the Chalmers. We need to hire hospitalists to do that job. And there are some hospitalists, of course, but we need to hire sufficient hospitalists to relieve our family physicians of that obligation so they can spend that time on their practice with their patients. And that would make a significant difference quickly. As would providing some support for them beyond what they earn for family docs to deal with the paperwork. Family docs tell me about 30%, and it blew my mind, and I've heard this repeatedly, 30% of their time is occupied with the paperwork they have to deal with. So I had to start out talking about drowning in paperwork and red tape and so on. This is insane. Having family doctors or any other professional having to be buried in paperwork instead of doing what they're supposed to be doing, caring for their patients. So that needs to be tackled. So we can reduce some of it by eliminating the need for sick notes and that sort of thing, but we also can provide some support. We need to rapidly make the transition that government after government has been talking about, that is from solitary doctors working by themselves to family practice teams that have multiple specialties within them. Nurse practitioners, dietitians, mental health counselors, physiotherapists, what have you. And what has been holding that up really is this. Right now, more or less, to make that happen, a physician would have to fund that themselves out of what they earn from their practice. Well, that's not possible. We need a funding model that would ensure that those other health professionals on the team would get paid through the Department of Health. Just like the physicians get paid from Medicare. This is going to require significant investment to make it happen. But the payoff is extraordinary in terms of righting the ship of healthcare, stopping its descent into wherever it's heading, which is not good, and creating that sense that we are starting to move in a very positive direction. We're fixing problems. Because when you do that kind of a team approach in a practice, and all the team members don't have to be in the same, office area. They can be spread out in different places. But when you do that, you don't have to go through the physician for all your needs. You can go directly to the nurse practitioner. You can go directly to the dietitian. You can go directly to the physiotherapist or whatever the team is made up of. This is different from the community health centers, which also some have team-based practices and others don't but should. The community health centers have a different but complementary role. In Fredericton, our community health center particularly serves the vulnerable populations, newcomer populations, as well as taking off the patient roster. And they do a great job. And they're transitioning towards more of a team-based practice, which they haven't had, which is good. The Queens North Community Health Center is a team-based clinic, and it's been around for some time. It's excellent. One of the family docs in Fredericton more or less insisted I go and tour it. He said, David, this is the model. It needs to be done for community health centers, and it is impressive. And they take patients from Fredericton. By the way, they're happy to see them if you need to go there. So that's key. With respect to recruitment and retention, we also need to make sure, and we would, that there is no light between what's offered here in terms of the nature of the position, the salary, the benefits between us, Prince Edward Island, and Nova Scotia. We're similar provinces, similar economies really, and we shouldn't be competing with each other over wages and benefits and bonuses. We need to essentially have equivalency. And I asked a nurse the other day in Mamacook, what needs to happen in the healthcare system? She said, bring me home. And I said, what do you mean? She said, I work across the border at Amherst at the hospital because I make more money there. And I immediately got a permanent position. Bring me home. So let's bring them home.
So on the attraction and retention side, you mentioned wages. You framed it as we shouldn't be in competition with our neighboring provinces, but with the relative lack of individuals available, are we in fact in competition with our neighboring provinces? And if so, how can we compete beyond salary?
Well, for New Brunswickers, they want to come home. They want to work at home. And so it's a New Brunswick advantage. They want to work at home. They just want to be paid the same as they can make in Nova Scotia or Prince Edward Island. So we can make that happen. So that's straightforward. But in terms of attracting others from outside, it's what I was suggesting. We need to provide actual services to settle physicians, for example, family doctors who are thinking about coming here, to serve their needs in terms of settlement. And we don't really have that settlement process built in, and that could use a policy, to help drive that. That would help. The other thing we're proposing is that we, particularly right now for primary healthcare providers, so nurses, nurse practitioners, nurses and doctors, that if they sign a contract to work here after graduation for 5 years, then we would cover their tuition with bursaries. But they'd have signed that contract. So we get the graduates from New Brunswick staying, and we get the graduates who are New Brunswickers from other universities coming back. And those things, I think, will make a significant impact on recruitment.
How about credential recognition? That seems to be something we all agree on would make a significant difference, but it seems difficult, if not impossible, to get movement there.
So the Nurses Association, the Medical Society are the ones who recognize that, and it is in the College of Physicians and Surgeons. So this is a stumbling block. There's been relatively little movement there. It's a big problem. Legislation was brought in and passed by the Legislative Assembly that, if it's used, could make that better, but it hasn't really been used. It's something that should come out of the negotiations in contracts with physicians and nurses, but it's really not been well addressed. So we've got to crack that, and we've got to get to the bottom of the problem and understand what is the anxiety that is driving the physicians on the physician side and the nursing side, the reluctance to make it easier for certification for physicians and nurses who are perfectly well certified from their home countries. The other piece of it is having doctors who will take on, for the practicum part of that, international doctors who have settled in New Brunswick, and that's not easy either. So we have to figure out how to make that work for them. And I've had too many international doctors tell me they had difficulty finding someone who would take them on for whatever the practicum period is, or started, but then the doctor decided it was just too much work and effort and let them go before they finished their practicum period. So that's got to be fixed. I don't know the actual answers, but we need to drill down to it and get it sorted out.
Hey, we could probably talk healthcare all night, but I want to move on to the issue that's probably been discussed the most over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, which is housing availability. The Chamber has advocated extensively for measures for competitive livability for New Brunswick citizens. What do you see as the most urgent and required steps to alleviate the pressures of the current housing crisis?
I think there's two things. One is to give NB Housing, now that it's been inflated again and it's got staffed up after decades of being essentially a paper tiger, give them a clear mandate to help drive the development of non-market housing that can be developed by nonprofits or cooperatives or faith communities or service clubs. We haven't seen that kind of boom in non-market housing since the last time NB Housing actually was functional with staff. And so they need a specific mandate to do that. When I met the CEO, I asked him his mandate, and he said, well, I'm supposed to implement the housing plan. I said, well, but you got to dig down into those commitments and see what's underlying them. So this is a key focus that we would ensure was in that mandate for them to drive the development of non-market housing, because that is going to be the easiest way to get more affordable housing on the market. For private developers, I think a really interesting way to drive more affordable housing there is to do this. We need property tax reform. We need property assessment reform to get property taxes reformed in this province. I hear property taxes number 2, going door to door, and I've had a lot of doors, of course, after healthcare property taxes. And so you have to go back to property assessment to address that as well. With rental units, if we tie the property assessment to the rental income, then suddenly it becomes more affordable for the developer to develop a lower cost rental unit, rental property, because the substantial part of their annual costs for running a rental property is property taxes, would significantly drop. If you have a higher rent buildings or luxury apartments, then you're going to have a higher rental income, then you're going to pay a higher property tax because the assessment would be higher. So I think this is a key to igniting affordable housing development from the private sector. And I certainly am aware of one property developer who would seize that and run with it. And it focuses the ultimate tax changes and resulting from the property assessment process changing to where it needs to go to drive affordable housing development specifically. And that's what we would do.
So chambers across the province, especially in the urban centers, Fredericton, Moncton, and St. John, have been advocating for more than a year now, and well beyond, on the so-called double tax and on HST on new apartment builds, which both PEI, Nova Scotia developers do not have those extra burdens, and they've seen more than double the housing starts so far this year than New Brunswick. Would you support those two measures across the board to drive housing stock overall?
Certainly, the HST cut, we've said, I came out right away when the federal government actually announced this on their side, and that New Brunswick should jump on it. And we didn't. Nova Scotia and PEI did. I also think it needs to extend, and I don't know what's involved in negotiations there, but to extend to renovating, repurposing buildings that need, are going to have to be stripped down to their bones and then restored. The greenest building is one that's already standing there, and you renovate it to meet your needs for affordable housing. On the so-called double tax, I think that our proposal for tying basic property assessment off of rental income will have a much greater impact on driving the development of affordable housing than reducing or eliminating what you call the double tax. Our solution, instead of doing that, is to tie property assessments to rental income. That'll significantly affect the taxes that rental properties have to pay, and will drive the development of more affordable housing in this province. There's no problem with more expensive housing being built. got apartments going up all over Fredericton that are beautiful and are serving a real market need. But what we're missing is the boom in affordable housing development, and our tax solution, I think, will be the one that drives it.
But comparing to Nova Scotia in particular, why would a developer choose to build in New Brunswick versus Nova Scotia if they're facing that extra burden? If you were running a development company, why would you choose?
Well, certainly they wouldn't face a lower burden if they're building affordable housing here than Nova Scotia. If it's more upper end housing, doesn't seem to be a problem. We're seeing that housing being built everywhere. Go to the city, Fredericton, Moncton, St. John. It's booming along. So I don't think we've got that challenge. I don't think we're missing out on that side of the development. It's the affordable housing development where we need to drive a housing boom, and our proposal will do that. I'm convinced of it.
Well, we do have half of the starts, but I do want to move on to municipal issues. We work very closely with our friends at the City of Fredericton to elevate Fredericton, to focus on urban growth. We're a top 10 fastest metropolitan growing area in the country, a capital city, second largest in New Brunswick. So we reached out to the city and asked them to provide us a question this evening, which is, how would your government work with municipalities like the City of Fredericton to assure urban-specific needs are met to help solidify and encourage growth?
Well, we would have an urban agenda, and we'd work with the municipalities as partners, not as foster children. We need to do that. We need to act as grown-ups at the provincial level and interact as equal partners with the other level of government in our province, which is the municipal governments, and we would do that. There needs to be an urban agenda. There needs to be targets for housing on the urban side, and we haven't got one. There has been, I believe, I see it at the legislature, a kind of systemic bias against the cities in the province. And we need to change that. We need to treat both our urban areas and our rural areas with the care and attention that they need, and it's different. They have different needs, and neither of them are getting really what the attention or their needs met. So we need an urban agenda, and we haven't got one. I don't remember when there ever was a real urban agenda for New Brunswick, and that's something to develop with the cities, with the municipal governments, and it's going to involve a whole bunch of pieces, including better transit. So on that, you know, I told this when I mentioned this when I spoke to the city council during that process. We would make sure that in the provincial budget there was a line for supporting operating costs of city transit systems to ensure that they can offer more routes and more frequent routes, more frequent service, let's say. So it's kind of a chicken and egg thing with city transit. We haven't got a city transit system in Fredericton really that you can market yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there. I mean, the big breakthrough for me was, because I use transit all the time, is you can tap your debit card now when you get on you don't have to worry about tickets or anything else, so it's fantastic. And it's made a change, and ridership is going up, but we would support that. So, but there needs to be an urban agenda, and we need to develop it, and I'm all ears as to what the best way of going about developing that urban agenda is. I'm an ideas guy, and I love to bounce ideas around with other people, and let's figure that out.
Well, on the urban agenda, Fredericton specifically, something that we've been advocating for is that the replacement for George Street Middle School needs to be in the downtown area to drive that density to urbanize. Do you support that? Yeah,
it shouldn't leave downtown, absolutely not. This whole approach that the Department of Transportation Infrastructure has of locating schools far away from anything in giant fields of nothing beats me. They need to be connected to community. They need to be embedded in communities and attached to neighborhoods, and designed and thought of and conceived of in that way, as traditionally schools have been. But we've seen the sea change. You can pick any schools. You can pick the Hanwell School, which is out there, and like that footprint is massive. And I don't know what's underground there at the Hanwell School, but they spent a whack of money fixing whatever the problem was, and they've got pipes sticking up, all kinds of things. Anyway, and the same with the Francophone school on the north side. I mean, it's in a big field all by itself out there, isolated. I don't even want to talk about the Moncton High School. I thought I was never going to get to it last time I went and spoke to a class there. So far out. Anyway, so yeah, we need to treat schools differently.
Great. Quickly running out of time, so I'm going to move on to workforce and immigration. The Chamber's repeatedly stated that immigration is the needed solution to our aging population in New Brunswick. We all recognize that our immigration success over the last few years has put pressures on some services and aspects of society, but immigration is also the solution to those issues, we think. How do you view our immigration policies and practices now, and what do we need to do in the future?
We don't have enough authority over immigration in this province, and we need to gain more authority over immigration. The Atlantic Pilot Project kind of pushed us a little bit ahead, but we need to go further. We need the kind of authority that Quebec has gained over immigration, and to address the specific needs here. I mean, it's impossible to talk to the immigration folks federally. You can never get them to talk on the phone. It's really hard to solve problems. So let's have the ability to solve those problems here in the province, in the city, by negotiating a different arrangement with Ottawa, so we gain more authority over immigration. I can't tell you, despite the fact I've been a provincial politician, provincial MLA, the number of people who come to me for help to get their permanent residency, to deal with immigration issues. Sometimes we find ways of doing it. We've had some really supportive public servants in the provincial government who are keen to knock down walls if it's possible. But we continue to run into these problems of what should be an easy passage from, for example, international students through permanent residency to citizenship. It becomes all too often a rocky road. And the same for other classes of people who come in. Sponsored refugees, asylum claimants. It's not easy, and it's complicated, and it's hard to advocate for them. So if we could bring some of that responsibility into the province, and then we can fix some of those problems and make it a much smoother process. And if we want to retain immigrants, by the way, two things. We've got to really address racism, and the city's been doing a lot of work on this, which is great. The province has got to wade in itself, and it hasn't. But it can, as other provinces has, as Nova Scotia has. And we also have to figure out some way with Ottawa to make it easier for some family members to join newcomers here in Fredericton, in New Brunswick. Because it's just as common sense as people with families. You know, if you're in a new place and this is where you're trying to make your life, if your elderly mom and dad can come, you're likely going to stay here. And if they can't, you're going to be back and forth and may go back. Anyway, there needs to be some movement in that direction to recognize the importance of family units. And I think we can make some progress there. I hear it at the door all the time. I've met so many people at the door who are immigrants who are, for the first time, have been Canadian citizens, became Canadian citizens recently, are voting their very first election. Are they excited? Hell, yes, they're excited. It's incredible. And they're so interested. They have lots of questions and lots of conversation. And, what a contribution to our community. But we need to address those two things, and we need to address as well a more direct route to, and provincially we have greater ability here into the workforce, particularly for tradespeople. We're talking about professionals like physicians and nurses and so on, but for tradespeople, there's no reason that tradespeople who are newcomers, who are immigrants, shouldn't get work in the trades far more quickly than they can right now. I was talking to an electrician who worked for 40 years in his home country, and the hoops he has to go through to essentially carry the bag for an electrician are horrendous. And you can say that about any of the trades. We're desperate for trades, as we are for doctors and nurses. We should be making it seamless and simple for them to move into the trades here in New Brunswick. So there's opportunities. There's been some pilot projects to help that happen, but they've remained as pilot projects. And I'm sick and tired of us being the province of pilot projects. Done with that. We need to implement.
Strong agree on all of that. I'm going to close with the knowledge economy, which in Fredericton we see as one of our critical strengths and resources, and a much broader area than a lot of people traditionally think of it. We see it's our K-12 education system, it's post-secondary, it's in healthcare. But what does the knowledge economy mean to you?
Well, good question. So certainly have the ICT sector, and it's been struggling a little bit. I know here there've been cutbacks and so on and so forth. But I guess you look at where are our advantages? How can we apply this to our greatest advantages, to forestry, to agriculture, to the energy transition? One of the things that Siemens has done, actually, here, they still have a headquarters in Fredericton, is shifted to developing cybersecurity for utilities that are starting to use smart grid. Because you don't want a smart grid without it being well protected, because you don't want anyone hacking that. So those kinds of opportunities aligned with where we're developing into the future with, and based on the assets we've got. So that's I guess that means a strategy, doesn't it? That's kind of the beginnings of a framework. Develop a strategy and run with it to see how it can best be applied here. But we've got to get over the fear of being the first ones to do something. This is crazy. It's all through government. People come with proposals, startups, and well, it's never been done here before. And right, so people leave and take their startups elsewhere too often. That's a problem. And we've got to have the courage in government to fail. We've got to have the courage to fail, because if we're trying to support economic development in our communities, in our regions, sometimes things aren't going to work out. Just like for entrepreneurs, sometimes it doesn't work out. And government has to have the courage to buy into that as a government. And I would. I'm not afraid to fail. I mean, like I said, I'm an ideas person, so lots of your ideas kind of go splat. But sometimes they catch. And man, watch them go. And we've got, I mean, there's I mean, the business community, the startup community here, the universities, there's RPC, underutilized in my opinion, its potential yet to be fully tapped. Anyway, on and on. But we need to harness this in some coherent way, and in terms of a supportive policy environment, government needs to create one that is designed to help them feel comfortable about failing by times. That's not the same as making stupid decisions, right? It's making decisions that sometimes won't work out, but based on, your best effort, sometimes they're not going to work out. And I'm okay with that. I got a thick skin. And you need to, if you're in government these days. If you're on social media, you have to. But that's it. We talk about, we know we've got a tremendous creative business community, creative people across in our rural areas, our farmers, creative people, fishermen and so on, food processing sector, wherever. We've got all kinds of creativity and innovative ideas in this province. That's not a problem. When I travel to provinces, I do regularly, I am inspired by what's happening in every corner of this province. But when you get back to Fredericton, it's just like, ooh, when you talk to the government again, our government. So that's got to change. So it's a cultural change that needs to happen in government, It's going to lead to necessary restructuring in government. Someone in the Premier's office is ready to take that on and ready to make mistakes and admit to them and move on.
Okay, we're running long. I'm getting the sign to wrap up, but I got to ask you about education in this knowledge economy context. You're an ideas guy. Fix education for me in 2 minutes.
You mean public education?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I spoke to the New Brunswick Teachers Association about this morning, so I'm kind of, it's in my mind. We need to do a number of things, but one of them is to properly resource inclusion and enable inclusion to occur at the level of the school and not be restricted to the level of the classroom, so that all kids get the kind of instruction and learning environment they need to succeed, no matter what their level. So those kids who need particular specific lesson plans tailor-made to them to help them succeed, need to address that. Those kids who are particularly bright and bored to tears and acting up in class because of that, or falling asleep, need to have, some enrichment experience in their classes. And we used to have this approach in the past, and we need to come up with a 2.0 version of that. Instead of the madness that is happening right now, and it is madness, where a teacher is expected to have unique lessons plans for an incredible diversity of learners in their class. It is diversity of learners and diversity of kids, some of whom's language skills are not as good as others, and so on, with our tremendous influx of newcomers, which is great. So they're being asked to bear an unbearable responsibility, and they can't properly teach and can't do what they have been trained to do. And the students cannot learn to their full capacity in that kind of environment. So we have to change it. We have to change it. And we shouldn't be afraid to do that. We need to be creating learning environments and enabling teachers to teach, to ensure every kid reaches their full potential, but they need to be able to do that in a way that's going to work for all those kids. And the way we're set up right now is not working. It's not. We're failing kids on all levels of the learning curve, and that's got to change. So that's the kind of thing we should be focused on with the Department of Education. And look, teachers are there. They want to do their job. They love their kids. They talk about creating a circle of care and love around their kids, and you see it. You see it at the Turnaround Awards. You see it at the Teachers' Achievements Awards, and I just think teachers are the best people in the world, except for nurses, because my mom is one. But so they have such an awesome responsibility and obligation to young people. Incredible. So let's give them the tools and the space to do what they know how to do, what they've been trained to do. And they'll do it with compassion and love and caring and professionalism, to utilize all their teaching chops to make sure their kids succeed in their classes. But the current setup is failing kids.
Okay, we are going to have to stop there, unfortunately. Looking forward to your small business tax announcement.
Me too.
Any final words? One minute to wrap up. The floor is yours.
People in this city love Fredericton. Ruth knows and some of you may know, I hold 2 community meetings in each neighborhood, which basically lines up with each ward every year. People come out, bring their issues, bring their concerns, give us some homework. We get a chance as a MLA and city councillor to give a little talk about what we're up to. Works very well. And when I started this, we first started sort of a quite animated process, and asking people, what they like about Fredericton, and anyway, one of those processes. People love their city. We love our city. It's incredible, and that is such a tremendous resource to harness in this city, and we need to do better at that, and to recognize that that's there, And I mean, I love going door to door. I'm sorry about going on, but I love going door to door because when you ask people what are your most important concerns or issues, often Frederictonians will, at the door, they'll look around in the street and they'll think, I don't know. They look and then think about their neighborhood. Go, well, the bus can come more often, or whatever. And they say, well, do you have a doctor? No. Oh, okay, well, let's talk about healthcare. But people embrace the neighborhoods they live in. They love them. They want more of a focus in their neighborhoods, like some focal point to be more community, like in some of those meetings. But can we have a pub in our subdivision, or a greengrocer, or some place where we can all gather and have, get together? And so, wow, what an amazing city this is. Well, we know it, and that really came through in those meetings to me. That okay, that love of place is something to harness and build on. Thanks.
Fredericton's awesome, no doubt about that. Thank you for joining me. Thank you all for coming. We're back Monday and Tuesday, same place, same time, with Premier Higgs on Monday, Susan Holt on Tuesday. Business Excellence Awards on Thursday at the Delta Fredericton. Hope to see you at all those next week, and have a great rest of your night. First, I'm going to start with the economy and growth. Again, so a lot of references to the knowledge economy here so far this evening, being at Planet Hatch, we consider Fredericton the epicenter of the knowledge economy in Atlantic Canada. To us, the Chamber, it means a lot more than tech and startups. We consider K-12 education, post-secondary, a lot of innovation in healthcare. So I'm going to start off by asking you, what does the term knowledge economy mean to you?
Well, I think that what we're seeing here in Fredericton has been evidenced many times over the years with major companies that started right here and hatched right here, to say a word, and developed and then were attracted nationally. So for us to have companies like Bulletproof or companies like Radiant 6, others that have actually made a difference worldwide from their attraction and what they've developed locally, I think it's this whole information knowledge and the importance it plays, whether it be in the cybersecurity world, whether it be in the new artificial intelligence world. I mean, we have a base here, and we need to find a way that government can support that in a meaningful way, that it can grow. I think what the opportunity presents itself now is that people really can work anywhere and be part of a company that is based anywhere. And so what we're finding, and we used to say somewhat, as a joke, that, live in New Brunswick and work in Toronto. But now it's a reality. You can actually live in New Brunswick and work for a company not only in Toronto, but anywhere in the world. And these digital nomads that we refer to, which I think I have one in my own household, my oldest daughter, who is now in Bangkok, but travels through Asia and spends her time, will come home for several weeks, but online, doing business, doing communications, and doing her work. It's really a whole change in the network of the economy. So how do we grow that fabric? How do we make the center that's right here develop so it just continues to expand in an area that's really quite unique, but I think an area that's brought people here because of our working conditions, our living conditions, because the quality of life is going to raise the bar. And I would say since COVID, so many people have taken a different approach to, I want to work, but I want a place to work that's not kind of a balcony that's 4x4.
So of course, the pipeline for that knowledge economy is the education system. So turning our attention to the public education system, what would you say is your 1 to 2 to 3 key priorities for the education system moving forward?
So I'm going to use an example of something that happened, and we've read about in the last week or two. But I had junior achievers group come in to see me in the office about 4 or 5 months ago. And what they brought in, they said, we need a financial literacy course in our junior high. And they said, our kids are coming into our programs And they can't add, they can't subtract, they can't multiply, they cannot understand the business acumen that's needed just to do our programs, which are introducing the business and introducing an opportunity to create young entrepreneurs. They came in with a program, lesson plans, and basically said, would you implement this in your school program for grade 8s? And it was in both official languages and with everything laid out, just plug and play. So I thought, wow, isn't this amazing that the community would be that passionate about what's missing? So we introduced it a week or two ago, just as they described it to me. I'd given it to the Department of Education at the time. And we called it, a financial literacy program, but getting back to basics. So what else is needed? And I think the people that really can help us here are people that have a business and have new folks coming into work at the university, saying, okay, to what level do our graduates coming out of high school meet the standards required at the university? Because you hear stories about that as well. And rather than spend a whole lot of time, saying, well, how did this go off the rails here or there or anywhere else? How do we get back to the basics, and what do the basics look like? And I use financial literacy as one item, but then you could go to, okay, what level of training do we need in this knowledge economy that we're trying to foster here in New Brunswick? What other areas do we need that are basic fundamentals that teach children to learn? And I remember when I graduated from UNB and I went to work at the refinery in St. John, I remember walking through and I said, shoot, what did I learn about a refinery? But what I learned about a refinery is what I learned at UNB was, how do I learn now about a refinery with what I learned at university? And we need to have kids coming out of schools that know how to learn, know how to expand their knowledge, and know how to pursue their dreams.
So we also have, in addition to institutions like UNB and St. Thomas, we have great relationships with students. So we got friends from the UNB Student Union here this evening, maybe others too. I apologize if I missed you. One of the things that they've told us is that on average, UNB students are living in households of 5 people, and each one of them are still paying anywhere from $600 to $800 a month in rent. Do you have anything to say to them? What specifically can we do to help alleviate those burdens so that they can focus on learning and becoming part of that knowledge economy?
So I did that. We had 4 people in our apartment, and I remember the bed was as wide as one single bed, and we had 2 in the room, and the room was about the size of a good bathroom. Actually, there were 1, 2, 3, 4 in that. And I worked at the Victory Meat Market, and I worked at the Student Union Building. But what I was determined is not coming out with a big student loan. Now, I know that was a problem before, but we have a lot of jobs now available in the province. And so the challenge is, what I've seen is that, the balance between what you need for an education and what you can get through a student loan that allows you to come out with a huge, great debt. Because, what is the focus? So there's a balance there to understanding how do we make sure that every student can get the resources they need in order to pursue their dreams, so we don't shut anyone out. And then how do you ensure that they can manage the money, so it's not like I got a loan of $25,000 and I can burn through it in 4 years' time, I got a loan of $100,000 when I graduate. It's like, what do I need to get this education, and how do I manage that right from the start? And I think there's a balance there that we've kind of lost sight of, and so our goal should be, number one, that no child misses out on an opportunity to be educated because we cannot find funding. That should never be a case in our province. And then it is, how do we teach everyone to be responsible right from the get-go in how they manage their finances, and how do we get through the education process. So I think, Morgan, there's a balance there in what's needed, and there's an oversight issue there that in terms of what works. And so it's not all about the government trying to make up for the spending that may be necessary. That's fine. But the spending that's not necessary, let's figure out what that is.
Okay, zooming out on the economy for a minute, I know we agree that private sector growth and investment is critical to future prosperity. What are one or two things that the government could or should be doing to help facilitate that private sector growth?
Well, I think that, we actually got an award for reducing red tape in the province and from the Canadian the Federation of Independent Business, because we've made some major changes in that regard. The idea of creating the right taxation model so that people can build and invest here. The biggest thing I think that was part of what we developed during COVID was the navigation program. And through O&B, so you kind of had a one-stop shop. Because what we constantly got for a complaint was that someone would go to government, they go to one department, and then they would go, okay, well, this is not our department, now you go to this department. Oh, well, this is good here, but this is not our department, you go to this department. So it was like O&B, we want you to take ownership for any client that's coming in investing in our province. So if it involves, the Department of Natural Resources, if it involves the Department of Transportation, whatever it involves, then you walk people through. And it's not a perfect model, but we guided a lot of people through COVID, and the goal, and it continues to guide people through any investment. Investment is based on time and opportunity. And when you don't have any sense of urgency in government, you lose opportunities. And I always struggled with that because I knew the concept and I knew how important it was. And when I'd get a call from a developer, let's say, that's building a subdivision, and somebody might have been in from the Department of Environment and said, no, you need that culvert to move down 20 feet down the road here and then put it in. And then they'd do it, and they'd have a crew that's waiting for approval, and then they'd call up, okay, I got it done, and the person would have gone on vacation for a week. And there someone sits there, their building complex sitting. The same sense of urgency that exists for business should exist in government. And we would go back to that when I'd have letters that would come through and say an answer to somebody's question, and I'd read it and I'd say, this doesn't answer anything. What's the purpose of this response? And they'd say, well, I don't really know. It's in another department. I would say, well, you take this letter and you go to that other department and you get an answer and a contact, and then you bring it back to me, and then I'll sign it. And then we'll make a connection to carry on the response. Because there needs to be an ownership within the system. And when I spoke about having people responsible for what they do, not to make it look like, and I said this so often, and it's a struggle, especially in the last 6 months of our government, because everyone's afraid to death of their job if government changes. And so they're paranoid. They don't want to do anything that would indicate at all that the government is doing anything right. They'll just stay silent. And then hope, one way or the other. But I said, look, you be proud of what you do. You tell people how great your department is and what your colleagues are doing and where you're fixing things that people are finding trouble with. But that is a challenge in government because, as we all know, everything that possibly exists in the province is my fault. And I've learned with that. I'm saying, that's fine, that's good. My wife, is kind of getting used to it. But we all need to be part of the solution. I'll take the blame, and I don't care if I get any credit. But I do think people need to recognize when the province is doing well and to state that clearly so the people in the system, can you imagine working in a system when you've maybe made a change and it's really working out and things are getting better, but all you hear is criticism? So it goes farther than just me or to my colleagues. It goes right into the system, and then that's why many communications that come directly from the internal part of government are pretty mundane, really.
Okay, the Fredericton Chamber and others were very strong advocates for the O&B Navigators program, so that's a success on our part and evidence that we can go a long way when government listens to chambers.
There you go. Hey, I always listen. Good shot there, right? See, it was Morgan's idea. It was.
Sorry. You mentioned taxation. Your big commitment so far in the campaign is to lower HST 2 percentage points. Interestingly, in Nova Scotia, the opposition has suggested doing the same, and your counterpart, Tim Houston, has raised concerns that they would have to cut programs in order to fund that. You don't seem to have those same concerns. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, the spending in Nova Scotia has been quite different than the spending in New Brunswick. Just to kind of make a point. We have managed the spending from the beginning. But in saying that, our spending levels have increased dramatically in the province. And I would guess we probably have, if you're just talking about outspending, in New Brunswick comparatively to the previous government, we're $1 billion more in healthcare today a year than we were 5 years ago. And if someone had said to me, and actually could tell me how, say, this is what's going to cost to fix healthcare, I'd write a check tomorrow. But anyone that flippantly says, I can fix healthcare with $325 million, isn't that the number? It's just not going to happen. And so how do how do we manage to deliver better services through better management practices other than more tax dollars? And that's what we're doing in healthcare. When we set up the boards in healthcare and changed them a couple of years ago, the whole purpose was bringing a business acumen to delivery healthcare. So in other words, look across the province, look at best practices, look across the country and look at best practices. And then decide, okay, how can we best do this in our province? And look at where you have strengths, look at where you have weaknesses, and develop a model that works the same as it does in business. Better results for the money being spent. And that is the goal. What has always been so concerning to me and is that every reporter always just says how much money you've spent. And I'm not necessarily looking at you by yourself. If there was someone else in there, I'd look at them too. But because it's like, oh, how much did you spend? It isn't whether you achieved any results. It's how much did you spend. That is such a poor model to quote on. But if someone says, I'm going to fix this and I'm going to spend this kind of money, well, make sure you focus on whether they fixed it or not. And so for us, we can afford to do that. We balanced the budget for 6 years running. We can continue with a balanced budget. I am not concerned about that. The reason we watch this closely is because our funding, as revenue, is basically made up today of HST revenue. And when I say that, it's just a growth in discretionary spending in many ways. And you say, how long is that going to last? Well, 100,000 new people has made that growth quite significant. But I don't want to get caught high and dry. And if I used a province as an example, I would point to Newfoundland. And it was back when Danny Williams negotiated the deal with the revenue from the oil reserves. The spending in the Newfoundland government shot through the roof. And then when the oil revenues went down, when the volumes went down, they're sitting high and dry. Taxes highest in the country, and all these things, that where do they go from here? We've built capacity in New Brunswick, capacity which we didn't have. And I hate to see that capacity swallowed up by a changing government.
So, speaking of Nova Scotia and competitiveness and tax rate, those things all kind of coalesce, I think, with housing. That's where I want to turn our attention next. On May 7th, the Chambers in Moncton, Fredericton, and St. John wrote a letter to you, and we'd been previously advocating, but came together around this issue, advocating that you follow suit with Nova Scotia, PEI, and others on removing the provincial portion of HST on new builds and finishing the work on the so-called double tax. That hasn't happened, as you know. And it has in Nova Scotia, and Nova Scotia and PEI have both seen about double per capita housing starts in the first part of this year. So is there some thought to spending that money elsewhere and addressing one of the key issues of our time, which is housing supply?
Well, there's no question the key issue of our time right now is housing in our province. When we looked at the capacity our province had, and speaking with many developers and asking, would you build more places if you had a reduction in the PST, I didn't get anyone saying I can build this many more units. I can come building them maxed out right now. I had many saying the prices are so high right now that it's not a good time for me to build because the rents would be so high it makes it very difficult for people to move into them. So that was $170 million, and I could not define how many more places would get built if indeed we changed it. So if we had a quantitative area that said, okay, this many would get built, and even more importantly, if we had say that would reduce the rental rates that are going to be charged, it'd be another discussion worth having. The 1.5, which we reduced the double tax down to, we're the only ones that addressed that. We started that in 2014, 13, 14. It was canceled between 14 and 18, and we brought it back in 18 and finished it to 1.5. Now, we held there for now because the same thing applies. And I think there's two things to look at here. One is if we reduce that, then I said, I want to know, well, we all know maybe how it all came about. The double tax, so to speak, the comments around that are based on the residential property tax that was brought in place. At one time, there was no such thing as a double tax. There was no such thing as a residential tax. But then back many years ago, 20 years ago or more, there was brought in that, okay, people that live in their own homes will get a residential tax credit. And therefore, their home costs went down on the tax basis. So then everyone said, well, all these other places are double taxed. So my question was asking, okay, what does a commercial building in Halifax or in other provinces compare to New Brunswick? And if we can say, all right, our tax system is a lot more expensive than a property than Truro or property somewhere else that's comparable, then you say, okay, we got to deal with it. So we went part way. And I'm open to looking at it to carry on that as we can stay a balanced budget, because that will be a defining moment. But the goal is then, okay, well, maybe the property taxes on rental properties, they're people's homes. So maybe that should be looked at as saying, well, why would they not get a residential tax credit on their home they live in? Well, they don't pay the tax bill directly. The landlord does. And then it's equated into the whole equation of the apartment building. How can we be sure that the tenant actually sees that, actually is the beneficiary if we do that? So there lies the challenges. If we're going to create benefits for people to be able to live and work more cheaply in our province, then we need to make sure that the changes we make not only foster growth in real terms, but actually get cheaper results for the people that are living and working and trying to survive.
Right, but would you not agree that increasing housing stock is the first step into lowering rents? And we've heard from developers and associations that the property tax in New Brunswick is about 1.4 times that in Nova Scotia, so about 40% higher. So let me ask you another way. If you were a developer, why would you choose to build in New Brunswick versus our neighboring province?
So there's two factors. The property tax, if the tax rate is higher, we should look at that and say, okay, is it because of what we're referring to as a 1.5 times tax now? Is it the municipal provincial tax rate that is making that difference? Because I would, and we've looked at that. So I know with Jill's here tonight, we've talked about those comparators because we want to be competitive with everybody in our jurisdiction. And I'm talking, in the Atlantic region. So if we can validate that we are out of step there, we will work towards fixing that. Because everything we're doing is trying to say, you're not disadvantaged by building and living in New Brunswick. And we want to make sure that is the case, but in real terms. Not just because it looks good, feels good, maybe it makes a headline, but it actually makes a difference. And we would look at that.
I look forward to following up with you on that.
I'll bet you will.
But
I'll bet you.
we've got a lot of things to get through, so I'm going to move on to
Oh, shoot, time to go home.
Don't worry, we're just going to talk healthcare now.
Yeah.
So, healthcare has been, we often get asked in the Fredericton Chamber, why do you care about healthcare? And the paradigm of social issues versus business issues is gone in our mind. Our businesses live and operate, our owners, our employees live and operate in communities. So accessing primary care has actually been on our radar for almost 2 decades now. We've had a physician recruitment committee since '09, actually. It's been that far. Our member surveys have brought back it being a top 5 issue over that time since 2 decades ago. The last 2 years, it's actually been our #1 issue. So it's not a new thing. It's not any one government's issue. But I'll start off with this. At the State of the Province this year, I asked you a question, and I'm going to go back to that. If an international company interested in investing in New Brunswick called you and asked you about our healthcare system and their employees' ability to access primary care, which is often the first question that's asked, what would you say to them?
I'd say it's a work in progress. We have doubled the number of seats in our universities in the last 6 years. We have, I think, about 1,600 graduates now that are coming through the system. There were about 800, 850 when we started. International students coming in are being qualified now faster than they were before. The virtual care model is growing dramatically, either through eVisit or HealthLink. The collaborative care clinics, which are a model we're using around the province because doctors want to work in that setting. The goal, when I started out talking there about the ER situation, is that we have a whole lot of people sitting in an ER thinking that's the only place they can go. And so the clinic, the walk-in clinics, the clinics that you can book, My Health app gives you that opportunity to book appointments, book x-rays, blood tests. It also gives you a spectrum across the province of whether MRI wait list, but that's only just the beginning. The goal is that you can look in this province and look across the spectrum of healthcare in both Fatality and Horizon and say, maybe I can't get an operation here, but a surgeon here that says I can't operate you in 6 months or a year could say, but I could send you to Gambleton. Are you interested in going? So give the options of our entire network. So we're focused very much on a patient-first strategy. And the whole goal in that is give patients a choice. And so, you know, are we better than other provinces? Well, I'll tell you for a fact, we do not have 180,000 people on a wait list. We have 34,000 on an actual wait list, and we have 70,000 or so that are on HealthLink. And so we have 100,000 more people in our province than we had 3-4 years ago. So it has presented additional challenge, and I can't apologize for that. In fact, it's, again, the pain of growth. Health is a challenge right across this country. We can't get more people, but we can have the same people do more. And when I say that, it's increasing the scope of practice again. And it's saying, okay, can we have paramedics do house calls and back up extramural? Can we have home care to pick up? Because we'll never build enough nursing homes. And we've put, I think, 200 million or so into the nursing home program. Jill, is that right? Something like that. And built multiple nursing homes this past. But we'll never keep up to the demographic that we see. So there's a whole lot of different models. And when I think of what I went through personally with my mother and dad, and so my dad died in 2015 actually. He was 95, lived at home, and was able to be out and around that day, and then just passed out in his bed, and my mom caught him. She was 96 as he lay down in the bed. But he died in his own home. My brother was able to be with them both, and we'd have a nurse come in and look after Mom as she stayed there. She died at just over 100. And we would have extramural drop in. We had a nurse drop in during the day for several hours. And people would say, how can you leave your mama way out there in the country, an hour and a half from a hospital? And I would say she's 98, she's 99 because she's in her own home. Our goal is to keep people in their own home as long as they possibly can stay and provide the services where you need it, and that's where you need it, in your home. So meeting these demands in healthcare, for aging, for primary care, there's a whole different model, even at the ER, to have virtual care options. So it's a work in progress.
So healthcare is all about people, as you alluded to, and we seem to have gaps at every level right now, doctors, radiologists, nurses. Are we in competition with other provinces for these healthcare workers? And if so, are we in that game in a legitimate way?
Well, we sure were in competition. The latest contract that the nurses turned down would have made them the highest paid nurse, the fourth highest paid nurses in the country. And they would have also had a month by month retention bonus over the next 2 years. And it was rejected. So I'm not sure what else to do in that regard. I think that we need to find out why. And I know there's been a number of concerns about the working conditions and the shift coverage and how do we get better, again, going to the management within the hospitals. And so we need to find out that the working place is what it needs to be. And I know we all have different stories of challenges, and certainly primary care access. But not all's lost. I mean, I've had numerous stories of people that have had great health care. And I would say when you need our health care, it's 99% you're going to get the good health care you need when you need it. But the routine health care challenges are real. And finding the ability to meet those challenges is different. It's pharmacies is different than it was in the past. So we are certainly in the hunt financially, but no matter what you pay someone, if they don't like their working conditions, they're not going to be happy. We didn't have people leaving our province in droves to go to other provinces. We had there's the travel nurse issue, as everyone did. Some cases paid way too much for the travel nurses, I won't go into that. But we're in the hunt, and every province has experienced it. We're not unique. So anyone who thinks we're unique or thinks that, I can fix healthcare, doesn't understand healthcare.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. You mentioned local government reform, maybe one of your government's most ambitious initiatives in your time in office. We work very closely.
To date.
Noted.
Yeah.
We work very closely with the city of Fredericton and our regional partners, and to elevate our community, we think it's important to work together. So we reached out to ask our city friends for a question for all of our interviewees here. And in the context of Fredericton being a growing city, Mayor Kate often talks about how our projections are based on 1,000 people a year, and it's been more like 3,000 a year. We're a capital city, top 10 fastest growing metropolitan areas in Canada. So in that context, how would your government work with municipalities like the city of Fredericton to assure urban-specific needs are met to help solidify and encourage growth?
Well, I probably should say right now, hold it, not any more growth. We need to hold down a little bit. So we have already encouraged growth, and I think there should be recognition that growth is being achieved. We pulled the brains back on the asylum seekers because they were about to send 4,600 people that had never been through a vetting process, had never really gone through the analysis of whether it was genuine asylum seekers or not. We have been and continue to be a very compassionate society. We will help anyone who needs our help, and we need to be cognizant of that. But if I ask Mayor Rogers, can you handle another 1,000 people in the city of Fredericton tomorrow? I'm sure what the answer would be. So what we're going through right now is this whole fiscal reform, which is the second part of municipal reform. And that is looking at every aspect of what it takes for a community to be the best it can be. So all the cards are on the table. And this is a very, very significant process. And the chamber should be involved in it as well, because we need all voices to be heard, and how do we get the right model? It's a significant process. The goal was to have it done by for the legislation in the spring, and it started in July. So that's the track we're on. I guess it's interesting to point out too, with the 30% increase in assessment values in the communities, the revenue that communities have taken in is significant. I mean, in the millions. And that's what we get a lot at the door talking, is we get people saying, you know, I'm paying too much tax for my home. And I will say, is your house assessed properly? Would you sell it for what you're assessed at? Well, yes. Okay, all right, so we'll stop there. Now we look at what should the tax rate be? Because there's the balance. Because in a residential property, 95% of the tax bill goes to the municipality, not to the government. So it's a blend of how do we work that out so people feel they're paying fair taxation for the service. And I know that's more of a challenge now with the larger regions and the municipality being responsible for a broader area outside of their typical city proper. So it's a new day, and it can't be understated, the work that's required. And it isn't about throwing out the property assessments and starting over. I mean, we've had that in different governments over the number of years. We've had the horrendous debacle in assessments. We don't have that issue. We have an issue of a market and supply. And due to the market, values have gone up. And that's just, you would all understand, market and supply.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have.
Shoot, Morgan, we're just getting started.
Well, listen, I have more questions here, but I'm just going to throw it to you for final comments. Anything you want to say, anything I missed that you want to close the evening with?
Well, I thank you for the opportunity. I mean, I've always felt very comfortable talking to a group like this, and I hope it's been informative. We have looked at government differently than has been looked at in the past. We will continue to look at government differently. And if given the opportunity, government will perform differently and continue to get better. And healthcare will be the mission, and education, the mission that we're on. Three main items: the health, education, and economic growth that is sustainable in its own right, not based on how much taxes can I charge individuals. Thank you, Morgan, for the opportunity.
Thank you for coming. Thank you to our partners, UNB and Ignite, on this series. Planet Hatch, a great host. And we'll hopefully see you tomorrow night. We have Susan Holt, the leader of the Liberal Party, here, same place, same time. Thanks very much for coming, and have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Morgan. Thanks very much.
Colleagues, this is the third and final evening in a series of 3 separate events to foster respectful dialogue concerning the state of our community and its role in the future growth of our province. As you all know, New Brunswickers will go to the polls on October 21st. The election follows a period of unprecedented growth in our province and the opportunities and challenges that come along with that. I speak on behalf of UNB when I say that we are a proud partner with the Chamber and Ignite to bring this series to life because we share a commitment to building a stronger community and a stronger province. As a university, we know that what we do creates positive change. We know that because we were fortunate to be able to see that in each and every day in our teaching and our research, in our partnerships. UNB is well known for excellence in a range of our academic programs. UNB's faculties of computer science and engineering, for example, rank in the top 20% globally, #1 in Atlantic Canada on the recent rankings, and we're very proud of this accomplishment. But we're also proud of the fact that our students leave with the critical skills and the abilities they need to thrive in a world marked by change and uncertainty. We're also proud of our research mission. Our researchers work to address the grand challenges of our time, from climate change to healthcare delivery. Their work can be mobilized to transform communities, benefit the public good, and foster economic growth and prosperity. But it's really the partnerships aspects that has really brought us here today, because we know that the best way to move New Brunswick forward is by working together. It is the collaboration between business, government, post-secondary education, and communities that drives progress and unlocks the potential of this region. Over the course of these 3 evenings, this series has taken a closer look at the state of our province and our city and address pressing issues such as education, healthcare, and housing. It also seeks to highlight the success and potential of Fredericton's knowledge economy and the role it can play in our province's future.
Dr. Majol mentioned the knowledge economy, which I think dovetails really well with your remarks on a tailored approach for each community. We certainly see Fredericton as the heartland of the knowledge economy in all of Atlantic Canada, so let's start there. Zooming out, first of all, I think a lot of folks see the knowledge economy and think tech startups, they maybe think Planet Hatch, but at the Chamber we think a lot more broadly than that. It's the K-12 education system, it's post-secondary, it's a lot of innovation happening in healthcare. So broadly speaking, what would you say the knowledge economy means to you?
Oh, interesting question. Look, I come from a background of time in IT, so certainly having worked for IBM and Cognos and Chalk Media and Research in Motion, oftentimes I start there because I came from that traditional version of the knowledge economy. But way back when I worked for Washburn and Gillis, that's a different version of the knowledge economy. It's still selling the knowledge of these consulting engineers to grow the economy. And then at one point, actually, Fredericton, I don't know if there's folks in the room, was a real interesting exporter of the knowledge economy back in our LearnSphere days when we had that whole, Roxanne's nodding, we were really leading in digital education and people getting training from what, I'm going to forget the name of SmartForce and others was a real hub here of people selling education in a different way. We have Atlantic Education International in the room, which is another great version of how we build on New Brunswick's knowledge and sell it to the world. And so there is a broader definition, even though my instinct goes back to that traditional one. We see investments in things like the hardware and manufacturing spaces and adoption of intellectual property, which is the university's bread and butter, and turning that intellectual property into something of value. And we're lucky to have the University of New Brunswick here driving that across a whole bunch of different sectors of our economy.
Great. So let's talk about feeding that pipeline through the K-12 education system. We've heard you talk a lot about that during the campaign. Could you address what do you see are your main priorities in the short and medium term for addressing the education system?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I love talking about education. You heard me say I think it is the silver bullet if we want to set up the future of our province. It's a clear social determinant of health. You want a healthier population, it starts with education. And look, John and I have 3 kids in the school system, so we have a grade 2, a grade 5, and a grade 7 kid, so it's right in front of us. And we see the challenges that our education system is facing today and the challenges our educators are facing today. So the short-term goal in our education system is stability. We need teachers in every classroom. We need the bus to show up and pick up your kid and the bus to show up after school and get your kid home, because I think every single day last week I got an email saying, these buses aren't running, these kids don't have a way home. That's That's not the way to build a world-class community. We need to have the basics done right. And once we stabilize for teachers that are doing so much, like the job of a teacher today is making sure the kid gets off the bus. It's making sure that the kid is clothed. They're doing social work. A lot of teachers are feeding students from their own pockets and from their own desk drawers. They are acquiring new students every week that get added to their classroom, students who are coming in who don't speak English, who don't speak French. The diversity of needs in the classroom has expanded exponentially from the time that you and I were kids in a classroom in this community. And so we have to recognize that the classroom has changed, and we have to give the teachers who are holding on by a thread. We have seen so many people leave the profession at early ages. We have to give them the support they need to stick around and stabilize the system. So that starts with human resources. And then we have to recognize that the model for education is shifting the same way the model for healthcare is. So as we move toward these team-based models of healthcare, we need to move to team-based models of education, because that one teacher with that diversity of needs in their classroom cannot meet all the needs of those 29 kids. When some of them have health needs, some of them have behavioral needs, language needs, different learning styles. That's why we have to build these teams of resource teachers, guidance teachers, school psychologists, and we have to make sure that those teams reflect that we have principals and vice principals that are educational experts who are spending their time negotiating maintenance contracts and dealing with budgets and doing things that are not part of their professional training as an educator. We could have those things being done by a business person or somebody like you and me who can balance the ledger and let the educational professionals focus on delivering exceptional pedagogy to our students with the kind of curriculum that responds to their needs. So now you've got me going. I'm going to go on and on. I'll stop
That's
really
what you're
shortly,
here
but
for.
the first instance, the short-term instance is stabilize. Put qualified teachers in classrooms to meet the growing needs of a growing population with a diversity and complexity of needs. And then together, we can start the transition to a team-based model of education that is more flexible and personalized for kids. Some of this is happening in our centre d'apprentissage across different parts of the Francophone school system. We see great things happening with Brilliant Labs. We need students in New Brunswick not just to be technology consumers and digitally literate. They need to be technology creators. They need to be digitally savvy enough to code the solution, not just use the device that it's on. So we have to continue to evolve our education to the needs of society, but right now we need to stabilize. We need to give teachers the support they're asking for and the colleagues they're asking for to stabilize a school system that is strained to the edges.
And how about the post-secondary education system as a part of that? Our institutions, do you view them as a resource, and in what ways can they help the pressing issues of the province?
Yeah, they're a huge resource. This is something that I've taken advantage of, I guess, in my time as leader of the official opposition, because our team held a series of roundtables with leaders from the sectors that were of critical importance to us. So we would hold a healthcare roundtable, and we wouldn't just bring in Vitalité and the Medical Society and Horizon and the Nurses Union. We also would reach out to the universities to say, who are your researchers in healthcare and health education and nursing, to make sure we had those cutting edge views at the table alongside the people doing the work today. So we did that at every instance that we had a housing roundtable, and there were the people researching who had the evidence, who had the data, who knew what was happening in other communities and other parts of the world, bring that research to the table alongside the folks who are doing the work on the ground. I think it is that kind of collaboration and team-based approach that helps us tackle these big problems. We're not going to tackle the healthcare crisis without people who have been deeply embedded in the research like we have at IRDT, right? There's folks who have access to a massive database of information about New Brunswickers' health and New Brunswickers' health practice. We have to mine that resource with the experts that we have at UNB to take those insights and apply them to how we're going to change the system with the practitioners on the ground who are doing it. So I think it's really critical that we have those research partnerships and that we have people training in the thing that we can't predict tomorrow, right? There's the mix of new knowledge creation as well as focused research in the problems that we know are in front of us today. So if I go more campaigny and platformy, we have a commitment in our platform around training grants. We want to take that $70 million budget of tuition aid and make sure that we're focusing support to the areas that both reflect New Brunswick's biggest challenges as well as match up with some of our research strengths so that we can really be capitalizing on solving our problems with the brilliance of our people in our post-secondary institutions.
You mentioned healthcare. That's exactly where I want to segue to next. Well done. Yeah, as you know, healthcare has been on the Chamber's priorities since before you or I were there. We've had at our organization a physician recruitment and retention committee since '09. It's been, in my tenure at the Chamber, it's always been on our top 5 priority lists. It's the last 2 years, it's actually been #1 priority of our members coming back in our surveys. So Fredericton's experienced rapid growth, not slowing down too much in the foreseeable future. So homing in on Fredericton specifically, what needs to be done here to address our healthcare challenges?
Well, Fredericton is at the pointy end of this stick. I mean, we know that New Brunswickers don't have access to health care. You know, we cite the number that the Health Council and the Medical Society have put out that 180,000 New Brunswickers don't have a family doctor. That is most acute here in Fredericton, in the province's capital. Almost 1 in 2 New Frederictonians don't have access to a family doctor. And when we look at the last 44 doctors that were recruited to New Brunswick, 1 of them came to Fredericton. We are a very underserved market, and Frederictonians need access to primary care. So the solution that we're putting in place, and I say we, this is not our solution. Curiously enough, when I was at the Chamber back in 2010, I wrote an op-ed for the Daily Gleaner about collaborative care being good for community. So this is not a new idea. This idea is 15 plus years old, but we need to move to a team-based model of primary care. And we need to recognize that primary care isn't working anymore, which is why family docs are abandoning the practice. They're becoming hospitalists, they're becoming specialists, they're working in ERs, but they're getting out of family medicine. And we have to change the model because it isn't working. So for us, that means you change how you pay for primary care. Right now, if you want after-hours care, it gets paid at half the rate of an office visit. So guess why nobody's offering after-hours care? Why would you? Right? We need a model that means I can get care before my kids go to school in the morning at 7 a.m. if I need to, or maybe after work at 7 o'clock at night. And that should be paid appropriately to make sure that that care is accessible. We need to support the fact that a team of people are delivering the care, and that government, much like I talked about in education, is supporting the administration. Because right now we have family doctors that are standing at the fax machine, trying to put through an order, or on the phone, trying to connect a referral. That work can be done by someone else. But right now, we don't support that. We don't fund or pay for admin support, and that's why doctors are doing paperwork and not focused on patients. So we need to put the administrative support, the technological support, and the team together to let our healthcare professionals focus on patients in this patient medical home collaborative care model. And we've committed to Fredericton getting the first one of those as we strive to get 30 open in the next 3 years. Bringing people together will help our current healthcare professionals serve more patients. So that'll help stop the growth of our waiting list that keeps ballooning. It's also the model that new doctors want to practice in, because we've seen Nova Scotia's gotten ahead of us on this, PEI's gotten ahead of us on this. BC just did a total transformation of their primary care model, recruited 700 primary care physicians last year. A bunch of those came from New Brunswick. So we got to catch up. We've got to get this model in place so that we can get back to being competitive in the recruitment game, but also so that we can retain and better utilize the nurse practitioners and the healthcare professionals that we have in New Brunswick today that want to contribute, that want to serve these patients, that are waiting at the ER to get primary care because they have nowhere else to go. So we need to aggressively, urgently transform our primary healthcare system with a different pay model, a different delivery model, the processes to support that, the admin and technology support, and an opening up of who delivers what care to New Brunswickers, so that instead of 1 in 2 Frederictonians having access to a family doctor, it's 1 in 10. Sorry, that's backwards. Who don't have access, 1 in 10 won't have access by the end of our next term.
So I'm sure we agree. Healthcare delivery is about people primarily. Your platform introduces retention bonuses for nurses. What other what other measures do you think are necessary for recruitment and retention of healthcare professionals from all strata, doctors and radiologists, nurses, and
Yeah, we always start by flipping it. It's retention first and recruitment second, because we've got to retain the people we have in the system right now. They're going to be our best recruiters, actually. So if they're happy and satisfied and prepared to stay in the job, they're going to help us bring new people in, because they're going to say, yeah, come be my colleague. I'm working in this clinic. If they're bailing from the system, then all your recruitment efforts are not getting you further ahead. So retention starts with things like that retention bonus is a sign of respect and a sign of value of the care that nurses have been given when they were promised retention bonuses and they watch those happen in other provinces. They've started leaving us and they feel completely demoralized, particularly with the travel nurse contract situation. So we're going to ask them, stay with us. Stay with us for the next 6 months, the next 12 months, as we try to improve your working conditions. Because the working conditions can't change overnight. We need to change how they access vacation, the retirement age for the profession, the long-term disability benefits, these pieces that are really making it hard to get up and go to work every day as a nurse. We have to tackle those working conditions. And the retention bonus is our ask to say, stick with us while we make some of these structural changes so that you can actually take vacation and you don't have to well, you're forking out $300 a month right now for disability premiums, which is the highest across the space. So there's lots of things like that we need to tackle to make sure the working conditions are good. Better working conditions actually means better colleagues. So until there's more hands and more help, we have nurses that are working short-staffed and in unsafe conditions during every shift at the deck. And so we have to be able to have both the working conditions, the retention bonuses, the pay, and the model that gets more people into the system to take the pressure off.
So bringing together the first couple of topics that we addressed so far this evening, Nova Scotia and PEI have also made significant investments in their educational institutions. Cape Breton University, UPI, St. FX, and Dow, to name a few, in things like new medical schools and health and social policy programs. Do we have untapped potential here in our institutions to expand our capacity in that way?
Yeah, I think we do. There's a couple question marks that I have on this that I'd love to dig into, and Paul and I have talked about some of them, because it was surprising to see when we needed more nurses that we went with an American education institution as opposed to the excellent institutions that we have here in New Brunswick to help us tackle that challenge. So I think there was untapped potential there that we didn't take advantage of. There's a brand new institute in public health that we're excited to partner with, because we know that there are more public health challenges ahead, like the one that we're still going through today. And I mentioned the IRDT. I still think that we haven't realized the full benefit of what's happening at the Institute for Research, Data, and Training. Did I get the T right? We also have interesting partnerships that UNB has been leading the way with other organizations like EDM and like STU, what they're doing with the Integrated Health Initiative in St. John is really exciting. We're watching that center come up. We're seeing the people come together around modern ways of delivering health for a population. So it's hard to say it's untapped when it's brand new, but it's exciting. We do have capacity still to bring more students into family medicine at University of Moncton in the partnership with Sherbrooke, and at the UNB St. John in the partnership with Dal. We used to be called the Dal MedEd program that I think is transforming their name to like Health Education New Brunswick or something, that acts as an incentive to keep New Brunswick students here. We'll pay your tuition with a return of service contract. We're not totally leveraging that program, even though it has successfully meant the retention of, I think it's 97% of the students that go into it with that kind of support. So absolutely there's untapped potential in our post-secondary institutions in New Brunswick specific to advancing our pipeline of health talent. Oh, can I throw one more in? We haven't talked about this yet, but we used to have the radiology program in New Brunswick, and then we outsourced to an Ontario program, which is making it really hard for us to get those techs back because they have to go to Ontario to learn. So that's a specific shortage that is impacting all of the rest of the healthcare system, and so I'd love to talk about if we could get that back in New Brunswick.
Maybe we'll get Dr. Masrell up here on the hot seat one night. I'm going to turn our attention now to public safety. It's one issue that we're hearing more and more about at the Chamber and broadly within the community. Citizens have expressed significant concern here. A lot of issues related to mental health supports, homelessness, but not exclusively, of course. And talking Fredericton specifically, there's been a lot of new measures put in place. The Community Safety Services Unit's been created, creating new policing models using social work support. Very broadly, what is your plan to improve and provide services to ensure public safety to our citizens and businesses?
He says very broadly. That is a massive question. So I'm going to kind of start where you were in terms of in community, what the City of Fredericton has been doing with their shift toward this community services team that incorporates social work. There's some real leadership there. Most other municipalities haven't tackled it this way, but it recognizes that the role of public safety officials is really changing as more and more people are experiencing mental health crises that lead them down paths that result in crime and public safety issues and find themselves in front of the courts when they really need mental health supports. So there's a whole bunch of pieces to this. I'm going to leave out the conversation about fiscal reform and partnering with municipalities to give them the tools to tackle their public safety deficiencies themselves. But I want to talk about two things. One, we're really interested in getting supports in the hands of the community organizations that are on the ground doing the outreach. So we're going to fund 50 different positions with community partners to do mental health outreach and support in community. That's something that Cindy Miles has been advocating for to me because she has deep experience in this space, and it's about empowering and giving the tools and support to the people who are already on the ground, who know who their customers are, if I can put it that way, and who they're working with, and need the government to recognize that they have that knowledge, and giving them the human resources to do the community level outreach is going to help. But we also need the longer term residential treatment facilities for the people that need them, because 7 days in a facility is not the way that you tackle a mental health crisis. And at one point we had these institutions of center care that were too institutionalized, and we realized we were doing it wrong and said, this would be better off in community. So we closed down those facilities and pushed everything to a community that wasn't ready, that didn't have the receptors in terms of the people or the spaces to deliver that kind of care. And so now we see it with the massive growth in people experiencing homelessness in New Brunswick. That number has reached 400 people in St. John just this month. I think it's 252 in Fredericton at last count. Over 1,000 New Brunswickers are experiencing homelessness on a chronic or regular basis in our province. And so this is something that we need to tackle at both ends of the spectrum. We need those beds in community, close to family and support networks to help people on the longer term journey. We need things like a mental health court, because jail is not the solution for folks who need supports and who need treatment. And the mental health court in St. John has shown to work. We need those partnerships with community organizations that are on the ground doing it. And we need the pipeline of talent to fill all these jobs. Because I think right now UNB has 20 seats in their counseling program. That's not nearly enough to produce the people that we need to work with the City of Fredericton, the police force, the community organizations, and in the treatment facilities to help us really address the mental health crisis that is a piece of what's resulting in higher levels of crime. There's a whole bunch of pieces to it, but I love talking about the mental health one because I could take it further and talk about school psychologists that I mentioned. We got to get ahead of this, right? We have to support kids and families before it becomes a mental health crisis, before it becomes someone getting kicked out of home and finding themselves in homelessness at the age of 16, 18, 19. So it all kind of, for me, comes back to education. And if we can support families with tools and learning and free school food and a school psychologist and the people who can help bridge the gaps with families who are looking for ways to handle challenges they're not equipped to handle, then we could prevent the kind of crime rates and outcomes that we're seeing right now.
So can I, certainly not to put words in your mouth, but a lot of what you just talked about is provincial responsibility. Can I assume that you feel like the provincial government has a much larger role to play in this area than we're currently seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. Mental health is healthcare. right? And for too long, we've separated mental health away from healthcare and made it's private, and private companies do that, and private people pay for it with the money they have in their pocket. Mental health is healthcare. They're completely intertwined, and so the provincial government is responsible for health, the provincial government is responsible for mental health care in partnership with the people on the ground that are doing the work every day in communities, in police forces, and in social organizations.
Great, thank you. Moving to a new topic, or a new related topic, housing development and livability. The Chamber and others have advocated extensively to assure a level of what we call competitive livability for New Brunswick citizens. On May 7th of this year, the Chambers in Fredericton, Moncton, and St. John wrote to the Premier and copied you in on that with some of our ideas for increasing housing stock in the province. Many metrics are showing that we're falling behind other provinces, especially Nova Scotia that you mentioned earlier. We talk a lot about being in competition with that province for resources for people. In your view, where do we stand in terms of housing development compared to our neighboring provinces, and are we in the game right now in that competition?
No, we're not. I mean, I think, as you said it, we've seen housing starts in Nova Scotia and PEI twice the rate of New Brunswick. So we're behind, and we're going to stay behind because investment is not coming here. Right? They've looked at the landscape and they've said, where should I put my next dollar? I can only do so many projects at once. And when you have a full tax rebate in PEI in Nova Scotia, then your development dollars go further there. And the current government of New Brunswick and Mr. Higgs and Ms. Green have not wanted to put forward a tax rebate for multi-unit developments, but a whole government will put that in place because that's one piece of the puzzle in terms of making sure that this is an attractive development environment. We want to get new housing built, and we have to be competitive with our neighboring provinces because that capital is fickle and it'll go where it's rewarded. And we're seeing the results in Nova Scotia and PEI who are getting the housing starts from that kind of, from their acceptance of the tax rebate that was put on the table.
So to be more specific, when you say tax rebate, are we talking about removing HST also on new builds and the so-called double tax on builds?
Yeah, two different pieces. So when the provincial government agrees to take the provincial tax off development, the federal government will take the GST off of. So it's a full HST rebate if provinces accept it, with every other province in Canada has done, except for New Brunswick. And so we will do that. The double tax is a different thing, so that we cover in our property tax reform. We need to overhaul the property tax system. It has been the same forever. It is not competitive with neighboring jurisdictions. I'm looking at Willie because I know he hates that we're going to put a rent cap in place, but I know he'll appreciate that we're going to get rid of the double tax, and we're going to have a system that has different categories of property tax, more than the 3 that we're operating with now, rules that couple those rates together, like the 2x on non-owner occupied from residential. But we also have a multiplier that constrains our industrial tax to our residential tax. We have an assessment system that is opaque, that it's really hard to predict how your home's going to be assessed year over year, which means it's a bit of a surprise every time you open your property tax bill. You just don't know what quite is going to be there. It shouldn't be this way. And there are different and better models across the country of how jurisdictions manage a clear and transparent assessment process, clear rules around how property is taxed, and then it has to be conscious of both affordability and competitiveness. We need everybody to pay their fair share, but property tax is a tool to build the society we want. We can use our property tax system to encourage affordable developments. So right now, not-for-profits get a property tax rebate based on the percentage of units in their building that are deemed affordable. Why isn't that available to anybody who is doing some affordable units within their building? Right now, that's only for not-for-profits. But if we want more affordable housing, then how are we incenting the development of affordable housing while still achieving community integration goals and other things? Right? If we want more density, our property tax system should reward density. If we want people to develop universally accessible buildings, then how does our property tax system drive them that way? So I think it's different from a tax rebate, but the property tax system needs to get modernized to recognize the challenges we're experiencing with the cost of housing for homeowners, as well as the cost of housing for developers and industry. Not cost of housing, cost of property for industry.
And again, the people is the other part of that equation. The Construction Association is expecting 10,000 retirements in the next 5 years, which is already a strained resource. How do you plan to tackle that specific skill set?
Yeah, not easy, two ways. I mean, we can always focus our training investments on those critical talent pipelines. So we need folks coming out of the construction sector, and we need to be making it easy for people to get trained in the construction sector. And that means making the tuition low cost or free and encouraging people into that space. We have to have the work for them on the other side. So government has a role to play in that in terms of government construction work. But we also need immigration. And we could probably talk all night about the challenging dynamic of the immigration conversation in New Brunswick and Canada right now, but there is no question that we need newcomers who have these skills to contribute to the building of the homes that we want to live in, the apartments that we want to live in, the accessible senior spaces that we want to live in. We cannot do it with the population that we have today. We need both training and a focused strategy to bring in the newcomers and the immigrants that are going to help build homes for all of us.
Okay, let's talk more about that.
Nice segue to your last subject area.
I'm going to circle back to something else, but
Okay.
I'm getting better at this, you know. So
Third time's a charm.
the chamber has been heavily involved in immigration for a number of years, and we agree that has to be part of our continued growth and filling those positions. We're seeing pushback in some areas on that in the public discourse. How do you plan to address that pushback in some sectors of society?
It's really frustrating when some of that pushback is being led and driven by the Premier of your province, who is blaming immigrants for the housing crisis and things that are the opposite of what the leader of this province should be doing. There wouldn't be a long-term care facility open in New Brunswick today if it weren't for the newcomers and the immigrants who have come here and who are caring for some of our most vulnerable and our seniors. And so we need leadership to counter the anti-immigration sentiment that is growing, to recognize what value and what benefit that we have received as New Brunswickers from people choosing to call this place home, choosing to bring their families and their lives here, and face discrimination, face racism, face a province that doesn't recognize their credentials, that doesn't let them deliver the skills they were trained to from their countries. We need to counter that narrative with firm statements and with leadership from people who are elected and from community leaders and from chambers of commerce and from universities. We can't give in to the kind of basic populism of too many people and it's their fault and I'm going to blame them for taking my doctor and for taking my apartment. That is not our way out of this, right? Our way out of this is celebrating and being conscious of, to recognizing the contributions that newcomers have made to this province, and that they're making it to the biggest crises that we face, because we will not get out of the healthcare crisis without more newcomers and immigrants choosing New Brunswick and being welcomed here. And we won't get out of the housing crisis without those people who are bringing their red seals and their specialized trades and choosing to call New Brunswick home. And if we don't welcome them with open arms, then someone else will. Like, we are going to fall behind in this, and we can't get caught up in whatever political movement thinks that it's advantageous to capitalize on them and call them others. That is the opposite of what New Brunswick's path has been to date. New Brunswickers have been supportive and welcoming of newcomers for a lot of years. The last time I saw it surveyed, I think, was 2006 or 7, and we were at 85% support for immigration and newcomers, and it went up from there. And to see that starting to slide back, you can tell I'm deeply worried about this, because it affects the future of our province. If we can't be a place that people choose to come, where their skills are recognized and where the community welcomes them and respects them and creates an opportunity for them to contribute permanently, then we will fall even further behind. So I think we have to both resist and speak up and counter those narratives at every opportunity that we have.
And how about from a provincial policy perspective? What we've seen a real drop in the number of entrepreneurial immigrants over the last few years. Do you have specific ideas on provincial policy that you'd like to see changed?
That's an interesting stat because I hadn't heard that, but I'm not entirely surprised because I think our focus on immigration we've lost our focus on immigration over the last little bit, and we see it even with things like international students and those student permits. That is a pipeline to future talent that has been compromised right now by a federal government who doesn't get what the reality is here on the ground. So we need a balanced approach. We need to be bringing in the people that are going to contribute to our biggest areas of need. We need to be bringing in people who are going to grow new things here. And I mean, this space just after it was first connected had something called the Hive in the back that was an evolution of the Business Immigrant Mentorship Program that the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce was the first organization to champion. It piloted the year before I got there. We did year 2 under me. It was a phenomenal program that paired up business leaders with newcomers who were wanting to start a business and helped them through the stuff that you can't learn on a website. And it resulted in an amazing organization in the back corner that brought and created community among those immigrant entrepreneurs so that they could support each other through a journey. We now have a New Brunswick Business Immigrant Association where they can also support and advocate for their own needs. And so if that stream is shrinking at a policy level, then I think that's short-sighted. And we need to make sure that we have a balanced approach to encouraging and bringing in the people that we need for some of our challenges and the people that are going to tackle the kind of growth we need to support it all.
Thank you. We are quickly running out of time, unfortunately. I am going to close very locally. At the Chamber, we feel it's very important that we work closely with our municipal government. So whenever possible, we try to advocate together in order to elevate our community. So we reached out to them for a question for this leader series, and just to set some context. Mayor Kate often talks about our growth projections are for 1,000 people a year. We're closer to 3,000 over the last few years. Top 10 fastest growing metropolitan area in the country, capital city, second largest in the province. So how would your government work with municipalities like the city of Fredericton to assure urban specific needs are met to help solidify and encourage growth?
The good news is I've heard that question before because the municipalities have been pretty active in this election. And I think you heard me say off the top that we need to get local with the work that we're doing in this small province. And so we absolutely need a portion of our growth strategy to recognize that urban challenges are different from rural challenges, and that we can put specific solutions in place that relate to urban needs that are different from the specific solutions we would put in place for rural needs. But even our urban municipalities are not the same and have different needs in terms of their priorities. So we have to give municipalities the tools to do what's best for them. That means tackling fiscal reform, something that this government promised, didn't do when they did municipal reform, and then didn't do it even when they said they were going to do it after the fact. And we have municipalities hamstrung with downloaded services that they don't have the financial capacity to address because the government hasn't finished the job. So we need to get that fiscal reform happening and then give the power, the authority, and the financial means for communities to govern themselves and have a government that is responsive to community-led solutions that have provincial government support. So it's recognizing that there are unique needs in Fredericton and that Kate and her team at Municipal City Council are tackling them in interesting ways like we talked about with public safety and their community safety organization. We have to follow their lead because they're closest to the ground, and honestly, municipalities are more efficient at delivering solutions. They stretch a dollar better than the provincial government does, if I can say that, and anybody here who's worked in either bureaucracy will know that to be true. So they're great partners for us. Our government is going to give them both the fiscal tools that they need to manage their community as they see fit, and then we're going to partner on the priorities that they bring to us and include a recognition of urban-specific needs in how we tackle our work. That also means making sure that leaders in the civil service understand that these are our customers. And it shouldn't be that when a mayor reaches out to either a deputy in a line department or the premier's office that they can't get a call back. Right? These are elected leaders of the communities in New Brunswick that government exists to serve. So we have to flip how we think about doing our work and get out of Chancery Place and into the communities that need a real partner at the provincial government.
And how about the regional service commissions in that piece? You've talked about about reevaluating the model. Can you be a little more specific about that?
I can. The regional service commissions are a great example of where one size doesn't fit all. We have some regional service commissions in this province that are doing really well. Typically, it's the ones that are made up of communities that are all of a similar size, and that size isn't quite big enough to have had their own things. So I think about Château, up where I am in the Restigouche. All of those communities are similarly sized. They come together and they share because they didn't have their own tourism bureau and their own economic development folks. Same with the RSC in the peninsula. They get great benefit from working together because none of them had those functions that they do together in their own, in Caracat or in Tracadie or in Shippagan. We see the same in Kent. The Regional Service Commission of Kent is functioning pretty successfully. Where it gets harder is where you have a big urban center and very small outlying communities. And we see the disconnect and the challenges that Fredericton has experienced trying to balance communities that don't have the means to contribute to a pool, but want the benefit of a pool and are trying to figure out how do we support a pool when we can't afford a pool as a small municipality next to a big municipality. The model isn't working for those groupings where we have real disparity between the sizes of the community within them. So I think we have to look at that and say, who were these designed to serve? Right now, it feels like the RSCs serve the government when they're supposed to serve the people around their table, the mayors and the leaders of the communities that they represent. They're becoming a fourth level of government because they get their money from the provincial government. They kind of get their marching orders from the provincial government. It's not working in the way that it should, but it's still new, so there's time to iterate and tackle the challenges without, again, expecting a one-size-fits-all solution. If we need to make changes to the regional service commissions that include Fredericton or St. John, that doesn't mean we have to change the ones that are working in Restigouche and the Acadian Peninsula and Kent. If we can get ourselves past the point of everybody needs to have the same thing, whether the shirt fits or not, everyone needs the same t-shirt. Well, I think we need smalls and mediums and larges and extra larges and some with a v-neck and some with a women's cut, and good heavens if you could find a universal t-shirt with a women's cut. So you get my point. We need to have different...
Kind of on the women's cut thing.
Anybody who's gotten a unisex t-shirt knows that, like, no. This is what I mean, right? We have to be able to tackle the instances where it's not working while not throwing the baby out with the bathwater where it is working.
I'll look into the women's cut thing.
Chamber golf shirt, like you think about your next golf shirts that you get and how Wendy knows. I know that Wendy knows this because we used to have an all-female staff at the Chamber back in the day.
It's going okay now.
It's going great now. It's going great.
So, great way to end.
Sorry.
That is all the time we have, unfortunately. But I want to hand the mic back to you for a minute or two for closing comments.
Sure. Look, I really appreciate the opportunity. It feels like a warm crowd when I'm sitting with someone who's doing a great job filling the large shoes of Krista Ross, who I was happy to hand over the torch to, but you have taken the organization to the next level, Morgan, the advocacy, the policy work that the Chamber is doing. You want me to keep going?
No, don't stop. Sorry. I didn't mean to stop you.
And I really appreciate the partnership and that UNB has come forward to support opportunities for us to talk about policy that impacts this community and our province. And I appreciate all of you choosing to spend your very valuable time here with me and members of my team tonight. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you all if any of you stick around since it's 8:02, although I see my husband's near the door, so that probably means that the kids need to go to bed. But thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for coming out and listening. Really appreciate it.
Likewise, I want to thank you for your time tonight. I know you're a very busy person. I also want to thank Mr. Higgs, Mr. Kuhn for coming to previous iterations and everyone coming out here tonight. Thank you to UNB and Ignite for partnering with us on this series. Much appreciated. And hope we've underscored the importance of discourse in public policy and really increased engagement in the process a little bit. So with that, I'll close things down, and thanks very much.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
They've reached the summit! Back-to-back Stanley Cup victories.
Greatness.
And a new legacy begins!
Absolutely amazing.
It has happened in Vegas.
It's not a destination.
And lightning has struck twice.
It is a continuous journey that never ends.
These are the moments you dream of. Stanley Cup champions!
Sports fans know Sundays are for football. That's why you need NFL Sunday Ticket. With NFL Sunday Ticket, Rogers customers get every live game, every Sunday afternoon, all season long. Follow your favorite teams and players live in HD. Order NFL Sunday Ticket and get up to 200 regular season games. Rogers Ignite TV customers say NFL into your voice remote.
Did you know that Elections New Brunswick has used tabulation machines to count ballots since 2008? A tabulation machine digitally scans paper ballots. It is designed to assist in summarizing information marked on the ballots fed into it. To date, over 2 million electors have cast their secret ballots through these machines. Before each election, every tabulation machine undergoes comprehensive testing to ensure it is programmed correctly and can count votes properly for each candidate on the ballot. Elections New Brunswick conducts routine audits in each electoral district after Election Day by doing a hand count of sampled ballot boxes and compares these results with the results reported on election night. Since this technology was introduced, there has not been a single change to the outcome of an election because of tabulation errors. Get the election facts from your trusted election source. Visit electionsnb.ca. Ever wonder how election results from a tabulation machine are reported and validated? On election night, a special key and a password are used to close the poll on every tabulation machine. Each machine prints 2 results tapes, which are signed by an election official and any candidate representatives who might be present. One tape is returned to the returning office, the other is kept by the election officer. Next, a modem is connected, which then securely transmits a results file to Election New Brunswick headquarters. If there is no signal, the results are telephoned in. Result files are first confirmed to be authentic and are then sent to our website as unofficial results. The morning after the election, each returning officer checks that the printed results tapes match the digital results sent on election night. Finally, in the presence of candidate representatives, each returning officer conducts a hand count on a sampled ballot box to validate the digital results. Get the election facts from your trusted election source. Visit electionsnb.ca.
You're watching Rogers TV.
Want to know if you can vote in a New Brunswick election? You need to be at least 18 years old by Election Day, a Canadian citizen, and permanently living in New Brunswick for at least 40 days immediately before Election Day. To get your name added to the voters list, you must show an ID that in combination shows your name, current address, and your signature. An NB driver's license is ideal because it has all the information we need, but you can use other documents such as a utility bill, lease, or passport. A friend who votes where you do can also vouch for you. You don't need to show ID at the polls if you're already registered to vote, but you must confirm your name and address before you vote. Get the election facts from your trusted election source. Visit electionsnb.ca. Before an election, Elections New Brunswick sends a voter information card to everyone who is on the voters list. These cards show the dates, times, and locations where electors can vote at the advance polls or on Election Day. Electors also have the option to vote at any returning office during the election. A voter information card isn't required to vote, but it speeds up the process. Another option available is to vote by mail. Contact the local returning office or Elections New Brunswick to ask for details on how to apply. Get the election facts from your trusted election source. Visit electionsnb.ca. Voting in New Brunswick is quick and easy. If you are on the voters list, Elections New Brunswick will send you a voter information card indicating where and when you can vote. Call Elections New Brunswick if your information needs to be updated. When you go to vote, take the card with you for faster service. In New Brunswick, you do not have to show ID if you are already registered to vote, but you must confirm your name and address. The election official will then strike off your name as voting. Another election official will give you a ballot and direct you to a voting screen to mark your ballot in secret. On the ballot, you fill in the circles for the candidates you are voting for, and then you put your ballot in the tabulation machine. Congratulations, you have voted. Get the election facts from your trusted election source. Visit electionsnb.ca.
Public transit, garbage pickup, parks and recreation programs, snow removal on your street. How can you stay informed about these and other important local